Hey everyone, welcome to my little live stream today. I'm Jason Odell, and my Substack is right here, The Photographer's Perspective. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate it. We'll wait a little bit to hopefully get some folks online and see in the chat. But today I'm going to be talking about one of my new favorite places to go for bird photography because I didn't know about it until just a few years ago. And that's down in the Boynton Beach area of Florida. And it's strange because I had never heard of these places, and I'll tell you why in a minute. So today we are going to go down to South Florida, just north of Fort Lauderdale, and I'm going to be showing photos that I've been able to capture there, both on my own and leading photo workshops, safaris, workshops for bird photography. So it's a really interesting place. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to go ahead and start with the map and make sure we are good here. So yes, here we go. So here is, I'm in Lightroom. This is my map module in Lightroom. And this is, if you recognize it, there we go. That's Florida, right there. So where we're going today, where my pictures are, is where this number is near between Boynton and Delray Beach, Florida. And if you were to just drive through this region, you would have absolutely no idea that there was anything there. Of course, most people have heard of the Everglades, and sure enough, the Everglades is right here, and you can get to some areas right on the edge, the eastern edge of the Everglades. From this area, there's some interesting national park areas. Loxahatchee is one of them. But where I'm going today is a different spot, and I'm going to switch over to the satellite view. And let's zoom in. So this is residential Palm Beach County, Florida. Not exactly much of anything there. And if you look at it, it is absolutely tract homes and golf courses. So you can see them. So it's just tract homes. But here, right next to the wastewater plant, the water treatment plant, there is a man-made wetlands. Sure enough, it's right here. And there's another one not that far away from another water treatment plant. Go figure. So these were built and they're man-made, and they're just right nestled in amongst these retirement communities with various golf courses and who knows what. So you could be driving right past it and never know it was there. So it's strange because I actually grew up. Let me go back out, zoom out a little bit to the regular map or the hybrid map so we can get some names on things. So I grew up in South Miami down here. So I'm very familiar with this part of Florida, the Everglades, as well as the Space Coast part of Florida, because I lived in Orlando for a couple of years. My parents lived there until they retired. So I was very familiar with these places. And then when I was talking with a photography longtime family friend and colleague of mine, I was asking him if there were some better places to shoot, because what had happened was the last time that I took a group down to the Everglades, it was really tough sledding, and I mean really difficult. The places that I would reliably shoot at, where you could just go in there and there would be just birds all along the boardwalk everywhere, they were empty. And I talked to the ranger and I said, I know I'm not here at exactly the dead of winter, but it was December. I said, what's going on? And they said, I've never seen the water this high, the water levels this high. And if anyone's familiar with the ecology of the Florida Everglades, you probably know that in the wintertime is the dry season, and a lot of that, they call it a river of grass. There's just water moving through the Everglades, and a lot of those lower, shallow areas simply dry up. And what happens is it leaves behind um, depressions, usually created by alligators, gator holes, where the birds will come in to feed because that's the last little puddles. Now, what's happened in the last 10 years since I've been down to the Everglades is a couple things. One, I don't want to say the C word out loud, but yeah, there's been some climate change. But more importantly, what's happened is um, the Florida water management system is routing water instead of out into the ocean. They're routing it back through the Everglades. And that's actually a good thing, ecologically speaking, more water in the Everglades. But what it's done is it's raised those water levels. And so the birds that used to come into the deeper areas where the in the winter to congregate simply don't need to congregate there anymore. And I want to say a colleague of mine once described it as the Outback Steakhouse phenomenon. Now, you can go to Outback Steakhouse and you can get a halfway decent steak. It's not the world's best steak. It's not, the high-end steak joint. But if you have to drive 10 miles across town to go to the good steak place or go around to your local Outback, which one are you going to pick on a random night? You're not going to go there. So that's what's happening with the birds down the Everglades. So I asked a friend of mine, and I said, where are some good spots in South Florida because the Everglades has just been killing me? And he said, oh, you got to go to Wakotahachie Wetlands and Green Cay. I said, where? Um, I had never even heard of them. And I grew up in South Florida. I said, why haven't I heard of these places? Well, it turns out I haven't heard of these places because they were constructed in the 2000s, like in 2010, roughly. That's when they were building them. And I moved away from Florida in 1989. So I had not been down there to see what these had turned into. So these two locations, turns out, let's go back to where my pictures are. So again, getting your bearings. Here's Fort Lauderdale. Here's West Palm. You've got Wakotahachie Wetlands and Green Cay right here. And they're only about a mile apart. So you got two really good shooting locations. And the way they are arranged is, we'll zoom in real tight here, but there's a boardwalk that goes right on top of the wetlands. And you can just walk. It's flat. It's super easy. You come in right through here. And same thing at Green Cay. It's a boardwalk. People like to walk on the boardwalk just to get their steps in there. And it is absolutely outstanding for bird photography. So what I want to do next before I jump into some pictures is the first time I went there to Wakotahachie, I was greeted with this. These are white ibis, and I'm shooting this with my iPhone. I kept going along, and here I am on the boardwalk, and look how close you can get to these birds. And the whole place is a giant rookery. And one more. Here's a tricolored heron just sitting on the rail.
Good morning. Yes, we're just saying hi. Say hi to all your friends back home, or all my friends back home, because I'm sure your friends are right here. Say good morning.
Okay. And I'm looking at the chat, and there was a question. Hey, Jerome, good to see you. And there was a question if I ever see feral parrots and parakeets. No, I haven't seen those. I saw them in London, the parakeets, and I've seen feral parrots in San Diego. Believe it or not, there's a few there. But what we're going to do is take a little tour through the photos that I've captured over the years, both on my own and as leading photo tours at these locations. So let's start in here. We come in, and I get there early in the morning, and the sun hasn't even quite come up yet, and you can do some amazing silhouette shots. So these are wood storks and a few anhinga in the tree. They nest in the top of the tree. A boat-tail grackle, and you can just shoot these silhouettes before the sun's really even come up if you get a nice sunrise, and that's fun to do. Here's a wood stork flying as the sun was coming up, was partially blocked behind the clouds. So I don't normally bring a wide angle lens to this spot, but you can imagine that it's if you had a short telephoto lens or a zoom lens, it's going to work great for this particular spot. So here's a wood stork at sunrise coming into land. And it's amazing that we can get pictures like this because 20 years ago, this shot would have been practically impossible because we wouldn't have had enough sensor sensitivity. The ISO couldn't go high enough to freeze the action. The shots would have been all blurry. And forget it with film, it wouldn't have even happened. You would have had a sunrise shot and you would have had a blur for that bird. The sun gets a little higher. Here's a cormorant in the tree, and with a little post processing, you can really pull out those pastel colors in the sky. Yeah, great comment from Jerome in the chat about the tricolored herons. They're extremely tolerant of people there. You can photograph them with your phone or even a short telephoto lens. So here's a male anhinga, and this is sometimes down in Florida they'll call this the snake bird. Now they do this behavior where they dry out their wings. Anhingas, um, which are part of the darter family of birds, I believe, they don't have an oil gland to waterproof their feathers with. Something we learned in junior, taking field trips to the Everglades when I was little. So they will swim underneath and they will spear fish with that pointy beak of theirs and come back up. And you can, I once saw an anhinga come up with a fish speared. It was down the Everglades though. And then once they're done, they have to sit like this in the sun and let themselves dry out because they just aren't waterproof. So you can get them doing these wonderful preening poses. Here's a red-winged blackbird. Nothing spectacular, but you can get them in nice shady light, and you can make those epaulets really pop. So one of the things in Wakota is where I showed you that first opening video where all those white ibis were there. They're there in the fall and early winter, but by the time you get into February and March, they get totally displaced by these wood storks. There's just hundreds of them, and they roost and nest in the trees. As you walk through in the boardwalk, you can almost shake hands with them. They're that close up to you, so you can do some interesting shots with them. And you can get them in all kinds of different behaviors. You can get them doing courtship behaviors. You can get them with nest building behaviors. It's really fun. Here's one of my favorite birds, the green heron. It was very much focusing on whatever prey it was looking for, and it did not care that I was right there. So here comes that wood stork again. And this time it's got a little bit of nesting material. It's going to bring it in and see if its mate approves. And when the birds come into land, they're going to do this behavior, they're going to pull up. They're going to flare up to put on the brakes, so to speak. And that's when you can really just nail them and get these dynamic shots with all the feathers getting blown around in the wind, the airflow. Here's a cattle egret. It's got its breeding plumage on too. You can see that really bright red and sort of magenta around its eye, as well as the orange plumage on its head and chest there. Hey, Eric, good to see you. Yeah, the wood storks, they certainly make their presence known. If you're in the chat, you can read what Jerome put in there. So here comes an anhinga flying with some nesting material. So you can get them too. And this is a really cool location because you can get all kinds of different shots. In some cases, you're right up on top of the birds. And other times, you can use super telephoto focal lengths. And you can get them in flight, or you can just get them posing and doing different behaviors. So you got a nice variety of techniques to try with your photography if you go down there. Here's that green heron again. Again, I just love these little guys. Now this one, that is not a green heron. Hang on just a second. Let me. This is a bittern. There we go. I knew this was different. This is the least bittern. And they're oftentimes really hard to spot because they will normally hang out down in the reeds when I've been driving through places like in the Everglades or in Merritt Island Wildlife Refuge up near Cape Canaveral, and you can practically walk right past them. But this is a really special find. It was really close. We got right in on top of this and were able to photograph this bittern. Here's a tricolored heron, just doing the tricolored heron flying thing. But again, a place that is this uh, species rich, but also population dense during this time of year makes it really easy to practice your skills, camera settings, capture settings, processing your photos, getting the best out of them. So it's really a great uh, sort of classroom for photography because everything is right there, and and also the birds are fairly large. You don't have to have a 600 millimeter f4 lens to get these shots. You can do this with a 100 to 400 millimeter zoom, full frame. Now, if you know what this one is, you can recognize its feet, black legs, yellow feet, snowy egret. It's the one bird I can recognize by its feet alone. Now, this is a pied-billed grebe. Grebes are little, they're waterfowl, but unlike ducks, which have the webbed feet, grebes have webbed toes. So they have these little flaps that come out when they paddle. So their toes are still separate, and then they have these little flaps on each toe. Now these grebes look pretty cute, but they can do their thing. They can get in there. So here's one that speared a fish and it got it. And I got this photo of the grebe nailing that fish. If you go to a place long enough and you're patient enough, you can start to get shots that are a little bit better than just bird sitting on a branch, or like I say, bird on a stick. Again, we're back to the red-winged blackbird. Very common, right? But with some patience and some practice, the males are always calling to announce their territory. All right. And if you have modern features in your camera, like fast burst rates, or even a feature that allows you to capture photos before you press the shutter button, that's a technique I teach on these workshops, you can get shots like this. Here is a Wilson's snipe. Yes, there is a bird called a snipe, and here it is. I saw this one. I think this was that green K. I'd have to go back and check. Now here's a little blue heron, but it's a juvenile, and the juvenile little blue herons are white. And you can see it's starting to get a little bit of that gray molting. And then after their first year, they molt and they will get that nice bluish gray plumage. I love little blue herons. They're one of my favorites as well. I guess I kind of like a lot of herons. I'm not really partial to any one, but little blue herons and green herons are some of my favorites. Here's a common moorhen. Um, Used to be called or common moorhen or American coot. I forget. This is an American coot, I think. Anyhow, they dabble along. They also have the web toes. They're like grebes, and for them, it's best to try to not get them on a super sunny day because they are black. But our cameras are good enough now to capture the tone range between that bright white bill and the black feathers. And again, you sit there and you watch them for long enough, they do something. Like in this case, it pops its mouth open. You're shooting at a relatively fast frame rate. You might be shooting at 8 or 10 frames a second. And you get shots where you have something more than just strike a pose. There we go. There's the common moorhen coming in to land. This was at Green Cay, and got lucky enough to see it coming out of the corner of my eye and managed to swing around and focus the shot on it. And fast frame rate, what does it mean? You shoot your camera really fast, frames per second. I know it seems ridiculous most of the time. Why do you need to shoot at 15 or 20 or gosh, sometimes even 30 frames a second? That's kind of ridiculous. But you'll get a shot like this out of your sequence. You'll find one where you can see that I love this reflection and how its foot hasn't quite touched down yet. Or things like this, where the heron was fishing and you get that moment of impact where it just stabs. And then sometimes you you'll get a sequence where it'll come up and it'll have caught a little minnow and they flip it up and swallow it, and you can see that minnow in space, in the air, right at the moment before the bird snaps it down. It's pretty wild, the kinds of shots you can get here. Earlier in the breeding season, here's a great egret. They've got the full on, quill plumage thing. The breeding plumage is going on. It's amazing. And they will do these displays for you. And this one, again, was not very far from where we were standing. It was just a few feet away from the edge of that boardwalk rail that I showed you. This was early in the morning. It was doing its thing, and a bunch of photographers were all there getting shots of this individual with this behavior. Very good stuff. Anytime you do bird photography, if you can capture action or behavior or flying or anything that isn't just the bird sitting there, those will be the shots you remember the most. And that's why a place like this affords so many opportunities. And if you go back multiple days, which we do, you get better at it, and you get to prepared as to what to expect. You start to learn the behaviors and the patterns and where the birds hang out, so you know I can hang out here. I'm going to see this particular bird or wherever, because they all nest in the same spots every day. Here's our incoming wood stork coming straight at us. I'm not usually a fan of clipping off the wingtips, but in this shot I accepted that. This is a glossy ibis. So in Florida they have the white ibis, which you'll see everywhere. But this is another one called a glossy ibis, and they're cool. They have this reddish brown color and the blue around their eye, around their nose. Really, really beautiful bird. And it's the breeding season, so you can sometimes expect to see some breeding season stuff that's going on. So here's the wood storks doing their thing to provide us with more wood storks in the future. Some courtship displays. And like I said, these birds are everywhere and they're really large. You don't need a super telephoto lens to photograph them. Here's a tricolored here, and I love this reflection. So here's a time when you got to remind yourself, turn the camera into the vertical or portrait orientation, and you can get a shot like this. And had a zoom lens, so I zoomed out. So rather than just capture a real tight shot of the heron, I went for the full reflection. There's our little pie-billed grebe again. And more displays from our great egret with that nice green patch right around its eye that really only comes in during the breeding season. It's a hormonal change, I believe. It causes the skin to get more pigments. Anhinga. Don't normally see him calling like this, but there was an anhinga calling, so we got it. And on this one, again, you're pretty close to the bird, so you notice how the background in this shot is just very soft. You get this wonderful subject isolation. That happens when you use longer lens focal lengths and you're fairly close to your subject. It's an optical thing, and it's not because I photoshopped it to look like that. Here's our little grebe. You can get in real tight. They'll just go through some more of these. Not everything is a close-up. You can get environmental shots as well. So this green heron is just on its particular stump. It's looking, gonna look for little fish to try to nab later. But early morning light, you can see that nice warm golden hour light on the bird. This one I like because of the reflections in the background. So again, this is a tricolored heron. They fly over this very short distance. So trying to capture them can be tricky because you got to be ready for them. But if you do, it works great. If you have your camera set up and you're prepared for it, thinking ahead, um, then you can get shots like this. But I really liked how all of those, I think they're like, banana plants or something similar to that, were just reflected in the water in the background there. It just makes it a more interesting photo than what would have otherwise been kind of black, dark water. Now, I mentioned that feature that some cameras have. Some cameras now have a feature where you can actually store images temporarily in the memory buffer, as long as you're half pressing your shutter release, the half press. And then when you press the shutter, it saves a specified number of shots from before you even press the shutter. If you get to looking at and watching these birds and observing their behavior, you can sometimes tell when they're getting a little antsy and they look like they're going to take off. Pro tip: they usually poop right before they take off. So this tricolor was just getting ready to take off, and I quickly switched my camera's drive mode, the frame advance mode, to this pre-release capture mode. And what that enabled me to do was shoot really fast, get this burst. And one of those frames, like at that moment where its toes were just touching, it's just about to take off. This shot would have been pretty much impossible without just tremendous luck prior to these features coming in on some of these newer mirrorless interchangeable lens cameras that we use nowadays. Here's one where it's got I can't tell if there was a fish in there or not, but it's same thing. It was dragging its feet. It was trying to go and fishing as it's flying along this little stretch of the water there. You might start to think that I like these birds. I really do. Wings up, it's flying, it's dragging the feet. You got water coming up, all kinds of elements that make it a more interesting photograph. And there's our angry bird again. This guy's a little bit wet, calling out to proclaim its dominance, whatever that might be doing. And here's another one of my favorites. And I think Eric had mentioned this in the chat. This is the purple gallinule, and you can see these in green K. The purple gallinule is really, this is sort of the northern edge of its range. They're more of an Everglades bird, and I've seen them down in places like Panama and Central America, but they are there. And once you see them, you pretty much recognize them instantly. And they have these huge, huge toes that they use to walk on top of the lily pads, the water lilies out there, and they wade along. It's pretty cool to watch them. Now in April, which is when I'll be going back next, the breeding season will have moved into the nesting and hatching season. So here's a juvenile anhinga. You can see it's still floofy. It's got some of its feathers have come in, but there'll be more, and I have more photos of these. So here's a white ibis. You'll see tons of them. Anyone who lives in Florida knows that there's white ibis everywhere, but they've got the really pretty light blue eyes. Okay, here is another fun one. These are colorful. This is a black-bellied whistling duck. I don't know its first and last name, but it's a black-bellied whistling duck, and they will be hiding in there among the reeds. Sometimes they'll fly overhead. They're very colorful, and it's a fun species to shoot down there. So black-bellied whistling duck. I like this one because I get the green heron really close up through framed by these reeds, which was pretty cool. So one of the things, once you get better at bird photography and you start getting the hang of it, usually after the first or second day, you can start going back to these places and being more selective with your shooting, and also you're more prepared because you start committing your camera's control settings into memory, into muscle memory. And so when you start to see shots like this, you know exactly what settings you need in order to get that pinpoint focus right there on its eye, instead of, say, focusing on the foreground reeds. And I just love the detail there. I mean, you can see every little feather in this bird's head. Here's a double-crested cormorant. The cormorants have the emerald green eye, and this one is just getting out of the water after trying to do some fishing. We even saw some wood ducks. I was just down in San Diego last month and saw some wood ducks there, but there are also wood ducks in Green Cay, down there in Florida, and they're just obviously very colorful, very spectacular. And if you can get them with some nice reflections in the background in the water, you got a money shot right there. There's the female Anhinga. She's looking pretty with her green eyeliner on. The females have the grayish brown buff from the breast up under their neck, where the males are all black. And there's the male, just so you can see the difference. This guy's got his do going on. He's got better hair than I do. Now, I mentioned being in Wakotahachie is a nesting site. Green Cay, not so much. But when there's chicks in the nest, you can in March into April and May, you can see babies. Now, if you look at this picture, you probably don't notice anything. But if you look really close down here, oh look, there's the little baby chick of this glossy ibis, was sitting in a nest. It was very dark. This was high ISO territory here for sure, but you will see babies in the nest. And so I like to go down different times a year for different kinds of shots. So this year, my photo workshop down there is for at the time for the chicks in the nest. That's the time I've chosen to do that. Here's some wood storks. Look at those. Not exactly the most because they're cute in their own way, right? And there's a baby. I think it's a moorhen chick. Yeah, there it is with mama. Not everything is a spectacular bird, but we've got lots of target practice nonetheless. Here's a boat-tailed grackle. The grackles look like plain black birds, but if you do catch them in the right light, you can see a little bit on the nape of this one's neck. There's that bluish turquoise iridescence that they'll have. So if you can catch the right light, sometimes you can make these work. They have a lot more color than you would think just by seeing them, and they're everywhere. They're pretty common. Then you can get into other kinds of shots, like why not do some close-ups? You're so close to some of these wood storks that sometimes your lens is just too long to frame the whole bird. So what do? You go for other kinds of shots, really tight close-ups. Sometimes it's toes. Okay, I like shots of bird feet too. Sometimes it's really tight portraits. So there's the wood stork again. Very prehistoric looking for sure. It's trying to remind you that its ancestors were once dinosaurs, but there we are. So you're really close to get these. This is not done from 100 yards away. This is done with a long lens from maybe 10 feet away. This one I just put in here because it's derpy. Get his tongue hanging out. I just thought that was silly. And you can see the iridescent feathers on this wood stork's wingtips as well. So those black feathers aren't just black, they're also iridescent green. So there are some colors there that you can get. Hey, coming in for a landing. And then I like to have a series of shots that I call like the bad hair day shots. So if it's windy, you can get them blowing around like this. It's kind of funny. Another bad hair day shot of this male anhinga. It's got some pretty cool feet. Now the anhingas have the webbed feet too, so it's perching because it's got the toes, not like a, you know, kind of like a duck, but same thing. Hey Lefty, good to see you here. I like to call this one three tenors because it just seems like they're singing in you know, I'm not sure which one's Pavarotti or not, but I just like this shot because again, it's you take thousands of pictures and most of them you dump. They're not, you know, all that exciting, but this one was kind of nice with them all calling up in the sky. They'll do this thing and they'll clatter their beak, and I like this one too because it's just that it's like it's floating in space. You know, you capture this moment. My shutter speed was probably somewhere north of, you know, 1/2000th, maybe even faster, 1/2000th of a second or even faster. So freeze that action. And even at those crazy shutter speeds, the wingtips still blur out a little bit. You can see those feathers on the top right. They're still a little bit soft. That's fine. I mean, the bird is sharp. Now, not everything's a big, giant wading bird. So if you do have a longer lens and you're patient, you can sometimes see little warblers poking around in the bushes. So this is a common yellow throat. It's a warbler that I photographed, and I think this was on the backside of Wakotahachie. Here's another warbler, and you'll notice on this one, I think this is a palm warbler. You can see it's captured a fly of some kind of insect is right there in its beak, and I've managed to somehow capture that moment where it was snapping on that insect. Don't ask me how I did that. That was pure luck. Okay, so we have to admit sometimes you just got to be lucky, but be prepared. Be prepared with your camera settings, and then get lucky so you can capture it. Make your own luck. This one, let me see what this guy is. This is a myrtle warbler. Okay, can't remember all their names. And this one is a Chuck Will's widow, and I know more or less where to find them. There's a pair that live at Green K in the back. So if they're there, I know where to look. It's very much under forest canopy at this point. I'm on the boardwalk looking down. Uh, this is another one where it's like high ISO territory. This was probably in the, you know, ISO 10,000 territory for this shot. But modern post processing tools allow us to clean these up like we were shooting at ISO 400 in the old days. It's amazing. I can zoom in for you, Lefty. There you go. Okay. Just a few more shots. Nice light, female anhinga. Real tight shot of that grackle. Another one of those blackbirds. You know, if you get the right settings and the right shade, they look pretty nice actually. Yes, this is my Angry Birds series. Apparently, I like this one because you can see those red and yellow epaulets really um, poofed out there. This is that glossy ibis again, down there amongst the reeds. This is a limpkin. We actually went to a different location because we had been pretty busy. We'd gotten a lot of good shots last year, so I took the group out to a boat ramp out by the Loxahatchee uh, Preserve, and this there weren't a whole lot of birds there, but there were some limpkins, and this was one of the shots we got from that area. There's a big fishing pier right above them. You would never know it from this picture. My birds coming in for landings, white ibis. This is a glossy ibis. And one of my favorites, which we don't have out here in Colorado, so I do have a soft spot for blue jays because they're just not west of the Mississippi where I live. So we've got other kinds of jays, but when I see a blue jay, I'm always happy to see them. Now, not everything is a tight shot at this location. You can get the birds flying overhead. So here's just the next few shots are of birds in flight where it's a more environmental look. You know, where you get the sky, where the sky itself and the background is as much of the shot as the bird in it. Here's an ibis. Here's a pair of those black-bellied whistling ducks. I just thought the sky was pretty. A nice silhouette. That heron is flying away from us, but the sky was really intense that morning. Or I think this might have even been an evening shot. And then a couple times I've been there, there's been a full moon. And I sat there very patiently, hoping and framing things up, hoping and praying that a bird would fly somewhere near the moon. And it doesn't happen very frequently. They just don't always cooperate, but this one did. So here's that wood stork passing right in front of the moon. And this was from a different trip. This was a little bit later towards the blue hour, but I still managed to get the I think that's a cattle egret or something. And here's an ibis silhouetted by the moon. Not easy to do, but possible. And that's the part that makes it a challenge. No matter how many times I go down to these places, there's always something new to learn. There's always something to practice. There's always just opportunities. You never know what you'll get. Now, not everything there is a bird. So there are gators in those ponds. We I think there was one time where actually it got something. There was a big ruckus and a gator actually nabbed a bird or something like that. Gotten too close. And they'll sit there and they'll look at you, but they don't hurt you. We're up above them. They're not good at climbing up planks. There's some brown basilisk lizards that live down there. So this one was really close. Had some cool stripes. There's another one, that crest. So these things are very prehistoric looking too. So these are non-bird opportunities. And of course, there's green iguanas everywhere now in Florida. I cannot believe how many of them there are down there. You can actually see these things crossing the street as you're driving along. You have to be careful not to run them over. But there's some really big ones, and the males, when they get into breeding condition, they've got the orange and the green. And, it's still a nice thing to take a picture of, take a break from just birds. And sometimes it's insects. So here's a damselfly. Now, post-processing is part of the game when you're doing bird photography because most of the time the shots don't well, some of the time the shots don't come straight out of the camera looking perfect. You need to lighten things up, darken things, recover sky tones, whatever. One thing I like to do for silhouette images is add texture layers. And if you follow me at all, you know that I'm a fan of texture overlays. In fact, I have some available on my website that I've done myself. Um, but here's an anhinga. The background was kind of blah. It was just a early morning, so I threw a texture on it. Here's one with a more painterly texture of a I forget which duck that was. I'm not sure. That's not a widgeon. I'm not sure. It could be. I'm not sure. Here's our piebald grebe again, but this time with a texture layer. So it just makes it more artistic. It's something to consider with your photographs. It's not something you do on every picture, but it's something to think about. And that's the last one. So let's jump back over to when I'll be down in Florida again. And if you have questions for me over in the chat, I'm trying to pay attention to the chat. So I'm going down the workshop that I'm doing for this year. I've been going down there every year for the last several years. It'll be April 19th, which is a Sunday, to um, Thursday. So really, we shoot Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. 3 solid days of shooting. We'll meet in the evening on a Sunday. Why? Because on weekends in Florida at these places, everybody and their cousin is there. So we're not going to have bigger crowds. Most of the snowbirds, in fact, will already be starting to leave because there's a lot of people who go down to Florida, in the winter. In fact, every time I go down there, I run into some of the same photographers every year. You get to know them. So I have this workshop. It's a 4-day workshop, and during this time that we're there, we shoot every morning and every afternoon into the evening until they close and kick us out. In the middle of the day, I teach you all the computer stuff. So what are you going to learn if you come down here on this? And Jerome, if you're still in the chat, you can testify to this because he came on this workshop a few years ago. But you're gonna start by I'll teach you all of my camera settings so that you can set yourself up for success and know how to change settings in the field based on the conditions. The scenario is flying birds versus perching birds. And then I'm going to teach you the post-processing stuff. How do you do this noise reduction techniques? How do you make selections? How do you use the tools? I use Lightroom, but whatever you might be using to get the best possible end product. Because the image, and I'll say it again, the capture part is just the first step. If that's all you do, and you take your picture and you just say, okay, JPEG, or straight out of the camera, you might as well take your photos to the drugstore and have them processed because you have zero control over that. So we bring them into the computer. I teach you my workflow, how to go through and triage images. Yeah, Kim is in the chat. You were there a few years ago. That's right. So I teach this end-to-end workflow. So how do you deal with coming back with a memory card and you've got two, maybe 3,000 shots on it, right? You've got to find a way to speed up your workflow, what we call triage. I will teach you that. And the wonderful thing about this place, there's two really great things about going down to Florida, other than the fact that I won't be in winter in Colorado, because believe it or not, it's still usually pretty wintry here in April. But if you're an amateur beginner, as long as you have enough kit, you don't need to be a experienced photographer. You need to have enough experience to know how to use your camera and how to change your exposure settings and your focus settings, but I can teach you the rest of that. And if you're high-end photo enthusiast, well, it's perfect for you too, because I give everybody free reign. Once we've gotten the hang of the lay of the land, so to speak, I let everyone kind of wander around those boardwalks for as long as they want. So we usually shoot from about 7 in the morning until about 10 a.m. and then we go back out at about 4 or 5 in the afternoon until 4 till about 6:30, depending on sunset times. So the other thing about this location is that it is absolutely minimum impact in terms of activity level. So I rate this one as mild. Okay, the boardwalk, the entire loop is about a mile on the bigger one at Green K, but it's flat and you're stopping most of the time. So this is not hard at all. You just have to be able to carry your own equipment. And sometimes my clients will drag a roller bag behind them, but I just go in there typically with a camera on a sling on a strap, and I go in there. So on my website, which I will put in the chat, let's see if I can put that in the chat. That's where you can go. Now, because you're here, I'm going to tell you a little secret. Let's see. Okay. My ticketing system, where I have my event page, unfortunately, they charge a fee for, they charge a ticketing fee. That's just how they make their money. We have passed the window for the deposit, because the fee on a deposit is usually like $10, and it's not very much. So if you do want to go on this trip, okay, contact me directly, and I can bill you directly, invoice you directly, and you will save the $55 ticketing fee that goes along with it. So that's a great way to do it if you're interested. Um, so um, that's what I got for today. It's it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, everyone. So I hope you've enjoyed learning a little bit about this birding hotspot in Florida, where you just, again, you, if you drove past it, you'd never know it was there. It's one of those places that usually either the locals or the hardcore birders know about. The average person might not know about this place, but it's a fantastic place to shoot. It's what we call a target-rich environment. So you're going to walk in there, and there's going to be tons of stuff to shoot. If you wanted to go, what would you bring? Um, you could. You would need, at the very least, you would really want some kind of interchangeable lens digital camera. In theory, I guess you could use one of those super zoom compacts, but you're going to have better success with a DSLR or a mirrorless camera. And if mirrorless camera has something like bird detection autofocus, even better. Most of the time down there, especially at Wakota you can get by with a 100 to 400 millimeter zoom, especially if you do a little cropping or if you have a teleconverter. You don't need the huge lens. In fact, there are times when the huge lens is actually too long. So having something like a, you know, 70 to 300 or 100, 100 to 400 is actually better than something like a 200 to 600, okay? But if you're interested in this and you have questions about the gear and you want to know, and there's lots of gear that can be had now, both on the used market, but also the rental. There's online lens rentals, and for a week rental, you could rent a much more expensive lens for maybe $200. And so you could have a lens for this trip that doesn't require you to go out and drop $2,000 or $3,000, let's say, on a expensive telephoto lens. So lots of options, okay. But again, it's a great fun. I keep the group very small. It's a go. I'm going this year for sure. So if you want to go, I have a few spaces left to join me. And when I'm in Florida, I always hit Carvel ice cream because I grew up down there. One of those things that we do. So if that's something that's interesting to you and you want to go, send me a message and I can get in touch with you that way. I mean, you're welcome to book on my website, of course, but that'll have all the details. If you want to save a few bucks, you can message me. So thanks again, Lefty. It'd be really cool if you come down there. That'd be awesome. So again, I'm Jason Odell. My Substack is The Photographer's Perspective. If you haven't subscribed to me already, please do. Just click my name up at the top of your screen there and subscribe to me. It's free, of course. I do have bonus technical content, including workshop type things, online classes for paid subscribers, but it is free to subscribe. I appreciate it. And also, just to throw it out there, I'm also going to be doing some more shows where I'm looking to interview fellow photography enthusiasts to bring them here live on Substack. And I'm also doing a new show right now, either monthly, once or twice a month, with neurodivergent Hodgepodge, and it's sort of an art hangout, and it's called the Misfits Muse. That will be under there, but I am a co-host of that show. We're still tinkering with things like our logo for that one right now. So again, you guys are awesome. I really appreciate everybody who tuned in today. And some people emailed me and said I'm going to post a replay. Yes, I will post a replay of this. So that will be at The Photographer's Perspective over on Substack. Thanks again, and I will see you all real soon.